Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Center podcast. I'm Emiliya Zhivotovskaya, your host and founder of the Flourishing Center. We are training the change agents of the world and equipping them with research-based tools for healthy, happy, and successful living. And we're so grateful that you're here.
Welcome to Coach's Corner, where you get to hear positive psychology in action through real-life coaching sessions with Emiliya Zhivotovskaya. She's the CEO and founder of the Flourishing Center and holds an MCC Master Certified Coach credential with the International Coaching Federation, the ICF. Coaching helps people get from where they are to where they would like to be. Listening to real-life sessions with real people helps us learn and grow together to lead happier, healthier, and more flourishing lives. We hope you enjoy listening to the transformative journeys of those that can help you in creating powerful and positive change in your life.
Thanks for listening, and let's dive in. Thank you so much, Venessa, for your willingness to be coached for today's podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So tell me, Venessa, what would you like to be coached on today?
So I've been a little bit stuck after the unexpected passing of my father about a year ago. And I was pregnant at the time with my second child, and he had passed away, unexpectedly, no warning. I had just spoken with him a couple of days prior. And I feel like I'm just kind of stuck. It's been a year, and I know the grieving process is a journey. I'm not expecting to not grieve anymore. But I feel like there's still a lot of really intense sadness, and especially when I experience and I'm with my second daughter, and how much I was looking forward to my father kind of seeing her and anticipating, them being in each other's lives. And I'm trying to shift more to a place of gratitude for what I did have with my father, and just letting go and allowing myself to feel the depth and breadth of everything, but shifting more into a reflective place of gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So firstly, my condolences to you and to your family. And I feel your desire to, on the one hand, kind of integrate and let this grieving process move through you. And then another part of you is feeling like you would like to see yourself maybe be a little bit further along in that process. And it feels like there's just a lot that comes up for you, and that there are specific times where more grief is triggered for you. And that one of those places is around thinking about your daughter and what it would have been like for her to interact with her grandfather, and other moments that are more connected with your family directly.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you captured it beautifully, and I appreciate your condolences as well.
Yeah, of course. And we have this time together allotted for our session, and I'm curious, where would you love to see yourself be at the end of our session about this topic that would be most helpful for you?
I think I would love some guidance maybe on, concrete tools or recommendations to incorporate into that gratitude practice, if you will, if just some more perspective from an outside person's head and heart that I might be able to integrate into my life.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So you're looking for it's beautiful that I hear you saying that you want to take the grief and the loss and transform it into a sense of gratitude and appreciation. And it would be helpful if we explored what some of those tools might be together.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I know that for me, I also have been through a number of losses and a number of people in my life who've passed away. And I remember that one of the things that was really meaningful for me about the way that I perceive death and grief is that sometimes people kind of sometimes we think the word like, when am I going to get over this? And I believe that grief is not something we ever get over. We just get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get this image of you kind of wanting to get through it and wanting to get to the other side. And knowing that it also, it's like a spiral, that the grief might still be there. And another thought that pops in my mind when I hear you say all of this is also, it's sort of like not either I'm grieving or I'm grateful. It's like, how can there be both grief and gratitude at the same time, maybe, even?
Absolutely. Yeah, that definitely speaks to me.
So where would you like to begin in terms of helping you explore how to be stronger and more connected to the gratitude of this?
I think, for me, I definitely feel it in my body, if that makes sense. Like when I experience that grief. And I think part of it is because when I was pregnant, there are a couple of things. It was on the heels of some back-to-back miscarriages, that I was pregnant with my daughter. And the last time I saw my dad in person, he lives in a different state than I do. But the last time I saw him was actually when I was miscarrying. Like it had started and I was about to hop on a plane, and he was, he's kind of has his own way of dealing with emotions, which is a little bit more removed. And I saw so much emotion and care in that moment. And that was like very impactful to me. And then to like leave and hop on a plane. So I'm giving you this background because then when I was pregnant with my now daughter and I was progressing and things were going well, we stayed in touch. We would talk about, we had like scheduled calls 2 or 3 times a week, and we would talk. And part of what we'd talk about is how things were going there with the pregnancy and everything. And he was so looking forward to meeting her, and that things were going well, especially after like the miscarriages and all that. And we had a visit scheduled like the beginning of my last trimester, basically like a couple of months after he passed away. We had a visit scheduled. So I feel like I'm kind of getting stuck on the what could have been, and the bookends of life, I guess. Probably passing in this little one coming into the universe, and I definitely, for me, like feel those things very intensely in my body. And I think part of it is because when I was super pregnant and my dad passed, like I was trying to give myself space and permission to grieve in a way that was authentic, but also not go too far from like a body standpoint because of stress and all of that. I didn't want to pass things on to my daughter.
So it's interesting because when I hear you talking about this, I can almost feel the weight on your chest and in your throat, talking about what that time in your life was like. And it was this kind of feeling where because you had your daughter inside your body, you wanted to really manage your own stress response. And now you feel like you have the space to grieve and you are grieving, and you would also like to be able to move through that in a bit of a different way and get to the point where you are feeling more grateful.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, what would things look like if they were ideal right now? Obviously not the like true ideal, right? The truest ideal is he would be here today, and we know that. And that's one of the hardest things about life, right? Is that we can't bring that back. We can't do that. However, I'm curious what you would prefer to see your response be like on a day-to-day basis.
That's an interesting thought. I think, I'm definitely moving in a direction that feels right and in a direction that is toward my ideal. I think for me, where some of my hangups are is like, I was talking about like that sensation in my body when like it gets very intense, and that might not ever go away, but I'd like to move to a point where that's not quite as frequent perhaps, or what I try to do is shift that sense of loss into focusing on what I did experience with him instead. But where kind of, I think within that, where I'm getting stuck is, and it feels very immature, and I'm like almost embarrassed, but kind of the loss of my dad has spurred it from my perspective. Like, it seems like it's spurred, we need to life a bit more, or, like maybe more visits, and so I'm feeling like a sense of, deep within, like not even in my head, but more in my heart of like, that's not fair. Like almost like a childlike response of like, that's not fair. Like, I wish I had that. And I don't like that response, but I also have to just let it be, because that's what's like some of what bubbles up sometimes. So I think ideally I would like to, shift in a little bit more of a comprehensive way into that space of gratitude from grief. And like you said, I think the ideal is to allow the space for both simultaneously, and that's beautiful, and I love that. And also be grateful for everything in its own right, not that something that is reminding me of the fact that he isn't here, and just kind of separating those things and experiencing everything without being reminded of, I wish my dad could also be here. Especially because he wasn't able, financially and time-wise, to really visit all that often. So the visits were like very few and far between and very special,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what's the hardest part for you about having the thought, I wish that he were here?
I think that the hardest part, well, there's like the granular response and the bigger abstract response. And the bigger abstract response is just that it's unchangeable. And I think I went through a couple years ago similar situation of very unexpectedly losing my best, closest friend, and it happened overnight. And so I had a, kind of a similar grief experience, but I feel like with my dad, it's that cycle of life, but also it's kind of like this ultimate passage of adulthood, where the generation that came before me is starting to wane, and the generation that will, God willing, or universe willing, live beyond me, is here. So I think it's perhaps like big picture that transition when So that's kind of big picture. And then super granular, I think what's causing me to like have a hold up is when I spoke with him, the last time I spoke with him on the phone, he said he wasn't feeling well, maybe like a stomach thing or something like that, and wasn't able to talk. So I said, okay, I'll call you on like our next scheduled time, which was a couple of days later. And I called and I didn't get a response. He didn't pick up, and I left a message, and I had this flash feeling and thought of like, oh my gosh, what if something's wrong? And I literally went to like, what if he's not here? And I like, when you have about 10,000 thoughts and, a split second, it was like all these things happen all at once. But I realized like I don't have an emergency contact for him. And he lives in the town that I went to college. So I'm like, do I call one of my old college friends who had a newborn and see if they could go check on him? I'm like, no, I'm going to a place that's like not necessarily likely, and we'll just chat later. And so I feel like for me, I had that coulda, woulda, shoulda, like, what if I did do something crazy like call the police, and what would have happened if he was okay, but also like could there have been something that I could have done if I had followed my gut in that moment, or is it better to have what happened, and who knows if there would have been prolonged suffering or something that he wouldn't have wanted either. So that's like the granular example of one of the granular things that I'm stuck on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I hear you saying that one of the things that's making this so difficult for you is that the circumstances make it that there were thoughts of, well, what if I had done this or what if I had done that? And that being something that, again, makes it a little bit harder than if you were just to be at peace with or accepting of the situation. And I kind of heard this in other things that you had mentioned just a little while ago when you were referencing even the emotions with your husband's family, that you watch these emotions come up within you, and then there's this kind of feels like there's this part of you that goes, okay, well, this is normal. These are normal emotions for me to have. And you're kind of, on the one hand, at peace with those emotions. And then the other hand, it's not wanting to have those emotions. And it feels like they may be coming up or at odds with one another. So what do you think that you need?
I think the biggest thing is accepting that, that I literally can't change anything in the past, and it doesn't serve me or my dad, frankly, well, to question like if I would have taken a XYZ action, would the outcome be different? Because it you just I can't go there. But I think there's kind of a beautiful lesson. Like my dad was very much about following one's true self, and he was Buddhist, and I think there's a way to honor who he was and who he is, and lives on through our collective memories of him, and also through me and these children, to honor that by identifying and kind of embodying and living the qualities that I really appreciate, and realizing that even from like a physiological perspective, like everything's different with myself right now, and that it's not necessarily. I think moving to that space that you described in the beginning, that really resonates with me, of feeling both, gratitude and grief, instead of trying to, tamp down the grief or turn grief into gratitude, that they can exist simultaneously. And that feels like a really true space to be,
Yeah. Wow, that's so beautiful. So I just want to highlight three of the things that I heard within that one is finding a way to be at peace with what has happened. And it sounds like your father's Buddhist influence is one that he would want to be himself at peace with the situation and with the choices of his life or his spirit or his body. And that finding that within yourself may be a way to honor him. And then the role of being compassionate with yourself, recognizing that was a lot going on, and that that one of the things that comes up for you is recognizing that there was so much that your body was processing, and that you're kind of creating a new normal physiologically, as well as a new normal with life without dad, and to just be kind with yourself and maybe not trying to force yourself into any particular way of being. And then I could almost hear a little bit more of a sense of peace in recognizing that the coexistence of grief and gratitude together, and what that might look like.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And so what might be different for you if you wholeheartedly embodied these things that we just said?
I think there's more of a true sense of observation instead of trying to influence. Like, I think there can be a sense of potential, I don't know if guilt is the right word, but, oh, I should be so grateful for all that was, or I should be this, and I think embodying that, especially that third piece of the coexistence of both grief and gratitude, I think that there's harmony within that instead of, one or the other, or trying to deny something that's just naturally bubbling up. And also, like I said, just more of an observation, just, okay, I'm feeling this, or I'm feeling that, and that's okay. And there might be times where I'm feeling 100% grief, and there might not be a speck of gratitude in that moment, and that's okay. And on the flip side, I've definitely, I have and do experience moments of just that sheer gratitude, and it's almost like the power of both of these both of those emotions, like the physiological feeling of them it's almost like two sides of the same coin for me. Of just, when I'm feeling intense gratitude, it is like that there's like, I feel it all like electricity, and feeling it like a wave, and in my heart and my gut, and all of that. And I feel almost a different version of that with the grief, and so that's kind of interesting, and something I want to add to the observation to explore, what are the different sensations, and how might they be more connected than I might already know.
Mm-hmm. And what would help you tap that?
Probably journaling. I would write my dad emails like every day for the first probably few months, and then now on milestones, like Father's Day, birthday, or if something kind of incredible happens. So I think getting back to that, there's something really cathartic of, I liked sending the email actually in a different way than journaling, because I felt like it was kind of going off into the ether, and what like what would be, what is his kind of account, but I can always go back and read my sent email. So I think going back to that, I think, growing up, I live in Los Angeles, and growing up, my dad lived in Los Angeles as well. And he was a musician and played at some of the locally famous clubs, in Hollywood on the Sunset Strip. So I think it could be fun to kind of go experience. I don't know if there's like a band in the genre of the music that spoke to him, kind of go experience that as well. And I don't know, just kind of shifting to a fun place in exploration, and hoping that, nobody knows for sure where we go and what happens, but hoping that he's kind of along for the ride, or experiencing that honor, or positivity and fun,
That's so beautiful. And I'm curious, how might those two things, the journaling and the taking on some of the different activities that he would have enjoyed, how would that relate to your desire to incorporate more gratitude into your experience?
Well, I think the actual experiences, kind of forces me to be in the moment, and there's kind of a contentment or reflection. Like I did do something like that when I was pregnant. It was on what would have been my dad's birthday, and I saw that Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin was playing on that day at like a music festival, and I went and I brought his little, I have a little keepsake ashes, and I brought them with me. And it was very new at that time, like it had just passed, but it was really it was like a wonderful, lovely experience. And so I think there's just something about that energy of like, even though he's not physically here right now, again, I don't know for sure if he's experiencing this or not, but I do believe that there's power in, he's an integral part of me through literally genetics, but also what values and what he has instilled in me by being my father, things that I'm aware of and things I'm not aware of. So I think by being purposeful and mindful of doing something in his honor, or something physical and literal, and that I'm experiencing, it's kind of like carrying him or his memory forward in that, which I like. And just by nature of I don't know, I can't even articulate it, but I think those experiences, like in and of themselves, have a feeling of gratitude to them, and then the journaling, it's a mix of everything, but a lot of memories bubble up, and things that feel like wonderful memories to try to explore and put pen to paper, as it were. And again, just kind of pausing to experience as much of the richness of those memories as possible, in a way that's not trying to like hang on to what was, but to just allow it to be. That experience, I think, is a positive thing for me.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. So I celebrate the awareness that you're able to choose to see things from the perspective of what's going to be positive for me, what's going to help me feel the way that I want to feel, what's going to help me show up in the world the way that I want to. And taking on both those practices and also that mindset of feeling his presence, it feels like it brings a sense of comfort to you. And when we started this conversation, you said that you wanted to explore the feelings that you were having and ways that you could shift into a different state as it relates to your dad, and in particular, recognizing there's some triggers that trigger your grief and things that you wanted to move from grief into gratitude. And we've talked about the idea of journaling, the idea of doing things that he would have enjoyed doing, really feeling his presence there with you, using that for a sense of strength and comfort. I'm curious what else you might need to create the type of peace and calm that you're wanting to experience.
So I'm interested in if you have any tips or recommendations about kind of the experience, the emotional experience in the body. I'm definitely interested in how I'm feeling that emotion, and if it gets to the point, like it doesn't happen as often anymore, but if it gets to the point of that kind of overwhelming grief, just how to explore or shift out of that from like a bodily perspective. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally does. And it's interesting because when I heard you say like the words overwhelming grief, I could almost like feel it bubbling back up to the surface in your body. I'm curious if that resonates with you, if something you noticed.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, there's definitely like a tightening or something going on. Definitely.
I'm curious if in that moment, even just when you felt it there, what do you feel your body tells you that you need?
Well, for me, like my brain goes to what's the opposite of that shift, and for me, like if there's a tightening, then the opposite of that is kind of release,
Mm.
And sometimes sometimes needing to lean in to like the tightness, even if it's literally like a muscle, to actually stretch that to release it takes, it's almost like you feel tighter at first,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I think perhaps again, instead of trying to melt that away right away, which is like my natural inclination, like, okay, I'm feeling this thing. How can I soften right away or shift, but just to stay in a place of observation and exploration, similar to what we were talking about before. So just kind of let it be, and things naturally shift or dissipate on their own. So instead of the human nature of like, okay, this is uncomfortable or intense or something that, something that might be viewed as less than positive, to just allow it to be a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I got this image of like something going and like almost like penetrating your body, and that while the knee-jerk response would be like stop it or get it out or like cut it off kind of a thing, that what I hear you saying is just leaning into it, breathing into it, recognizing that it's normal, almost like feels like a melting of the sensation throughout your body, and which is different than kind of like the gripping. So it sounds like initially there's a part of you that feels gripped by it, and um, instead just sort of allowing it to just move through you. Hmm. And what are some things that would help you create that sense of allowing?
Well, I think right now I'm in the more reactive approach of like when it happens to just go to that place, and allow. I think perhaps with the journaling and having some concrete kind of experiences that might also help with the allowing as well. I think the reason why my natural state is to not allow that is I think that runs pretty deep. I think it's because, for various reasons that would take a lot more sessions, but the need to be strong and to be capable, and I do try to allow myself to feel things fully, but to like I feel the need to also overcome. And as I'm moving through my life and especially becoming a parent, the overcoming is a lot different than I have handled it for the past, 3+ decades. And that allowing is the overcoming. And so I think valuing allowing first and foremost, and observation, and the messy simultaneous blend of things that can happen, like the grief and the gratitude. So I think having that be like a huge mental shift of a North Star of just allowing, not in this particular situation, but in life in general, will ultimately impact everything, and definitely including what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So I hear you connecting to the sensations of your, like the messaging of being strong and being able to handle it. And I can hear how much power you have in that. I'm picturing you being pregnant, having this loss, and being able to sort of choose to stay strong in some ways, right? Because you felt like you had to for your child, and that's so respectable. And I hear you saying that there's almost more familiarity around how to just stay strong and take care of it and kind of move it along and move through things in a very linear way. That is almost more comfort there than there is comfort in the, I'm going to use the word messy because that's the only one that I have. Like messy or acceptance or allowing of it may feel a little different for you.
Yes, definitely. And especially when it comes to now being a mom, I think I have an internal pressure to model strength. And part of modeling strength is definitely modeling vulnerability. And I'm trying to be very aware and mindful of that. And that's definitely been a journey too.
What does strength mean to you?
To me, well, it's different now. I think there's like my historical paradigm and then where I am right now. And where I am right now, full strength means keeping kind of my core values and perspective, and knowing that even if things shift kind of on the surface, i.e. things that are happening to me, that all of those core things are still under the surface, even if like my ability to interface with all of that is like changed in the moment. That's really abstract, and I don't know if it makes sense, but that's kind of what it's come to mean for me, or what it means in that moment. But that basically creating like a porous or more permeable outer layers, knowing that kind of the inner layers are, that like I said, like my values and who I am and all of that is there, regardless of what's happening kind of on the.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what role does grief play in strength?
For me, it's interesting because I'm fairly comfortable with the grieving part. I feel like there's strength in definitely allowing oneself to grieve. But I also feel like the pressure to evolve the grief into the gratitude. And so that's why like the most powerful takeaway so far in our conversation is accepting the blending of both.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. And I'm curious what that would look like.
I think no expectations, so it's I'm going to have to think for a minute to define that, because I think a lot of it is just more openness, recognizing, and I've definitely been trying to do this on this journey, but recognizing the difference between fully allowing myself to feel everything all at once, and, like you said, the messiness of that, while also recognizing if there's like a cycle that's not serving me well, so I think I've been scared to give any, what I perceive as like negativity power over me. But instead it's just, I think it's still something that, like I said, is not serving me well, but just to allow more space, to let myself feel anything and everything that I feel, to give myself space to just feel. Cause I think that, life with 2 young kids, it's hard to find the time to just be. So to create more space for emotions to pop up and about this and any aspect of my life. I think there's that, but also more tangible feeling gratitude and grief. I think it's totally human and normal to have that simultaneous experience of, so grateful for everything that's happened in the past, so grateful for the impact that who my dad was and is, lives on through me. So grateful for, the lineage with my children who are now growing up. So I think being okay with the inherent sadness that he's not physically here right now, and that's okay. And again, just keep going back to, instead of trying to transition that feeling into something else, just allowing it to be okay, to feel that, whether it's once a week or 5 times a day or whatever it is.
So what are some of the strategies that you'd like to implement as a result of the things that we've been talking about?
I think creating time every day. I try to do breath meditation, but I think mixing it up and having some of that time be focused on some of these things that I'm feeling, because I think they might need more attention than I'm giving them. So have more of a container built, to dedicate. Like, okay, I'm giving myself time to bubble up. And if things don't bubble up regarding, this realm of my life, that's okay too. But I think a little bit more purposeful of, diving in instead of like reacting to when it's kind of coming up for me, to just give myself the permission to like have a defined time and space for things to bubble up, I think would be helpful for me right now. And also the journaling, I think is important. And I was definitely doing that more, but, and it could be, committing to journaling in general. And as things come up with moving through grief and all of that, to have it be a part, but it doesn't have to be the only topic, I think taking some of the tactics and broadening them, like simultaneously creating a focus or the allowance of, okay, if this topic comes up with meditation, or a little bit different than meditation, but with like mindful thinking and breathing and journaling, to just allow the ebb and flow of, okay, I need to think about this right now, but having it be on the agenda, if you will, or just asking myself like, okay, are there things that I need to work through or feel or observe right now? And if not, to let that go, but to like ask myself kind of that question before doing those activities.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. One of the thoughts that comes to my mind is how we might make that something a bit more tangible, or what would help you go from that concept to, here's what I'm going to do moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I don't know at this moment. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hear you saying that the pieces of it, though, just has to do with first starting off with this intention for time for yourself, and kind of the spaciousness of whatever will come up, be it reflecting on your father, or reflecting on how you're feeling, or reflecting on what you're needing. It sounds like for you, it starts with setting the intention to take this time for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. There is an exercise that I would love to share with you that may be helpful for when the emotions get really strong. It's something called havening, and havening is a psychosensory therapy or modality. that utilizes touch to create a sense of calm and peace and tell the brain that it has a a safe haven, that it doesn't need to be experiencing the emotions as strong. It sounds like preventatively kind of giving you, like you said, the reframing of giving yourself the space to actually process and digest in a way that you may not have had it when you had gotten the initial news of what happened, um, and doing things that would help you connect with your father's spirit. All of these sound like they're really great and will be really great preventatively. And so I'm thinking that we could maybe add in a tool or an exercise for when you're feeling that really gripping sense of emotion that you were saying, where it just sort of overwhelming, and use something to kind of help soothe it a bit so it's not so overwhelming and it's a bit more manageable. How does that sound?
Thank you. Yes, that sounds great. I do think I think I need help grounding, in that in those moments for sure.
Beautiful. So havening, and you can look it up online. It's spelled Havening. Havening is a process of utilizing touch and utilizing self-touch, self-soothing to downregulate the amygdala response, the stress response. Um, and the way that it works is there's one of three different movements that you can take on. The first one is you just take your hands together and you take your fingertips to your wrist and you go and you move down your fingertips like you're washing your hands. So you go from wrist to fingertip, wrist to fingertip, wrist to fingertip, like you're rubbing your hands together, but not rubbing them back and forth. You're rubbing them in a downward pattern. So wrist to finger, wrist to finger, wrist to finger. How does that feel when you do that with me?
I hope I'm doing it right. I have my hands in like a prayer position.
Yep. So I like to do it with one hand on top, one hand on the bottom, kind of like switching them over, like if you were just rubbing your hands. But I see how that feels.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely feels comforting.
Yep. And now if you take your arms across your shoulders, so crisscrossing your hands in front of you, so right hand to left shoulder, left hand to right shoulder. And then you're just going to move gently from your shoulder down to your elbow, and then lift your hands back up, and then going again, shoulder to elbow, down, down, down. So it's sort of like you're rubbing the side of your arms the way that you would if you were cold. But if you were cold, you'd be rubbing up and down. Here, we're just going down, down, down. How does that feel?
That definitely feels definitely
Yeah.
calming.
And then the third one is face washing. You're going to take your hands to the center of your forehead as though you're about to wash like water over your face, so that the fingertips touch the center of your forehead and the meaty part of the pads of your fingers touch your cheeks. And you're just going to go from the center of your forehead to the temples of your forehead. So center to temple, center to temple, center to temple. How does that feel?
That makes me sleepy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so calming. It makes you sleepy. Rubbing the palms together or rubbing the side of your arms or your face is we use the sensation, the electrical impulses that are coming from your skin to your brain to create a delta brainwave frequency. And that delta brainwave frequency is actually one of the frequencies that's highest while we're sleeping. So it's interesting that it makes you so relaxed that it's sort of like, oh, I'm sleepy. And this is the havening touch, which is used usually combined with different visualizations and different exercises that can actually be used therapeutically. But for purposes of what you're looking to do, which is just to calm your body down when the grief just feels like it's so strong that it feels like it's going to break you, just to be able to kind of slow it down a little bit so that you can get a bite-sized chunk rather than something that's so big that it feels like it's overwhelming. You could use one of these three touches to do that.
It definitely, it's interesting. I feel in the moment, even
Yeah.
that
How does it
short
feel
period
when
of
you
time,
do
like
it?
very calming and relaxing and comforting. But afterwards, like right now, I feel a little bit more energized.
So when we first started the session, you wanted to explore some ways to shift how you're feeling, to keep moving through this time in your life, this new chapter of your life, both with this new being in your life, your daughter, and the transition of your father no longer being here. And I'm curious, what are you taking away from our time together that's been most helpful for you?
Definitely the theme throughout of simultaneously allowing grief and gratitude to coexist, and that the presence of one does not necessarily mean the absence of the other. Um, that's definitely the biggest for me, and shifting to more of an observe place of being, and being more strategic or mindful to create, through journaling and through having experiences kind of in the honor of my dad, and also um, breathing or meditating, kind of with the intention of allowing these thoughts or emotions to bubble up. And then definitely the havening, that's a powerful technique that's just available wherever my body's available. So, if grief does overwhelm in that moment, that will be very useful as well.
Mm,
Thank you.
you're welcome. You're welcome. And I celebrate that this kind of allowing more and giving yourself this permission to be human, to feel what you're feeling and digest it, rather than just jumping into like being strong. I recognize that this is a newer way of being for you, and I celebrate the strength that you are creating.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, beautiful. So does this feel complete for you, in terms of a coaching session?
Absolutely. I appreciate it. I appreciate your perspective and helping me find what might have been bubbling under my own surface, and adding a new voice and way of looking at things to that as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're so welcome. Thank you for making the time for this. So I know this is your first experience with coaching, and so thank you so much for participating in this and agreeing to be coached. And I'm wondering if it would be helpful for you to hear me kind of debrief the coaching process and what coaching is based on the experience you just had. Would that be helpful?
Absolutely. Yes.
Cool. Because I know that a lot of people come to coaching with this kind of misunderstanding of what it is. And you kind of think, okay, I'm going to get some good advice on what to do, which I kind of feel like I sensed from you in the beginning. You're like, I want you to give me ideas and strategies, Emiliya, right?
Right. Right.
And then you're like, okay, she's with me. I feel her with me. She gets me. She's really interested in supporting me in this, and yet she's not giving me answers, but we're getting somewhere. And you're like, I'll go along with this, right? That's kind of what it was like. And the reason for that is in coaching, we have a real fundamental belief in wholeness, in fullness, in completeness, in perfection, actually. And the belief that I like to train our coaches to believe in is that our clients have within them all that they need, and all that they have they need. It's not that I don't offer up my insight or my perspective or even advice. It's that I believe that that should come secondary to the wisdom that you have within you, which is primary. And so my job as the coach is to kind of help move through and uncover what you already have within you and amplify that, and do so in a way that together we can help move you forward better than you would if you're just trying to grapple with some of these things on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And then within that, we use curious questions, and we use reflections, and we use all sorts of different processes to help you figure out where are you, where do you want to be, and navigate that, but in a way that You as the client are in charge of the session. You lead the session. I'm not trying to lead you towards a particular outcome. You lead and I follow your lead to help you do that. And so that was kind of the way that that's sort of what you experienced in the process. And then at the end, I still had some tools that I thought might be helpful. So of course, I'll still add that in and kind of give you some science and why behind the tool. But I believe that all of those things come secondary, because what happens in our world is we get a lot of really great advice from people. But if we're not intrinsically connected to it, if we're not on board, and all the great advice we're going to get is going to kind of fall to the wayside. So it's better to help people do that which they know deep down inside is what would be helpful first. And then we could add in other things that can also be helpful.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate that, and definitely felt that, it's helpful to have you guide me through deeper reflection, or kind of re-examining, and your questions became my questions, which sometimes by just asking a different question, or asking even the same question in a different way, we can uncover a lot more answers. So I appreciate that. I felt very much simultaneously like I had been doing a lot of the right things, but I was stuck in these certain ways. And, there's a lot of pressure when we human beings are trying to unstick ourselves, but by having your very supportive, and there's, can tell there's a lot of love in what you do, and just holding space for me to be safe and explore and be heard by you, definitely was a very natural journey, with a topic that's can be difficult to talk about. So I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, thank you so much for your participation in this, and know that I'm here for you in the future.
Okay. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
This episode is brought to you by the 5i Change Agent Quiz. Our research shows that there are 5 personality types for people that love to help others. Take this short 20-item test to find out which type you are, and download your free roadmap to learn about the obstacles your change agent type faces and how to overcome them. Learn more at theflourishingcenter.com/change agent.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I want to encourage you to tell us, what would you love to hear more about? Is there an area of positive psychology you would love to get some more information on in terms of the research? Give us a shout out at info@theflourishingcenter.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you a wonderful flourishing day.